And if somebody says something wrong, they will learn, right? That's all I can say. And I'm not saying anybody, I mean, I could end up saying something wrong, but that's how you learn. That's how it becomes normal. The more we tiptoe around it, it's just like,
Fair point.
Yeah.
So
So you guys are,
just to give you a background of how we're doing it. So a group of us have actually come together and we formed this, it's a completely student-driven initiative. So let me give the caveat that HEC is not really, it's not under the HEC brand, though we're all HEC students. So some of us have come together, and this is, like I said, this is the 5th session that we are having. So initial 3 sessions were with the recent students, as in students who are still at campus. And then we had 1 session with an MBA coach. He's also an alum, HEC alum. And Vincent Eid.
Okay, cool.
So now we have 5 industry sessions lined up. So this is the first industry session. So this is on finance. We have 1 coming up on marketing and strategy, entrepreneurship, and we have 1 more on tech. So that's how we applied. And to accommodate like I said, we have 3 batches here. So to accommodate all of them, we are also simultaneously casting it live on YouTube.
That's good.
This
That's good.
is the YouTube, yeah. So
yeah, perfectly fine. Yeah, I saw that go on. I assumed it's because Zoom can't hold that many people.
Hold that thing.
Are you guys? Do you guys have a pro account with Zoom, or how does that work? Because otherwise, just 40 minutes cut off, right?
Yeah. So Archit, one of us has, and we use that. Yeah.
That's good.
Keep the recording on YouTube because a lot of our batchmates, probably it's, especially from Far East, it's a little late in their day, so they can come back and watch it on recording.
Yeah, no worries from my side. Yeah,
we just wanted to let you know that we would be recording.
It would be good if you could just share the link because it helps to spread the word around in my WhatsApp groups and say, hey guys, this is interesting. You guys should do it.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. So we're just waiting.
So have most of you are you guys still working? It's June end, so I'm assuming most people will work till July end or so, right?
So yeah, I think a lot of us are working, but yeah, I think that's where we are right now. The notice periods are coming in closer and closer. So I think now's the time a lot of us are taking the call whether to, jump into the September 20 batch or defer it.
Yeah, that's interesting. But what I've seen, that the coursework is pretty flexible, so you could start and extend it if you later on feel you need to extend it, because a lot of my batchmates are still they're going to sit for the September jury, so they've taken a 16-month MBA, now it's 24 months, right? So you could do that as well. So that could let everybody do is get done with the coursework in the first few months, and then spend the remaining time in France as a student, looking for things, interning. So yeah, but it's a tough decision. I wouldn't want to personally be in those shoes.
So we're just trying to ping the other panelists as well, so they're just joining us.
Always. I hope I wasn't that unwanted guest who showed up early.
No.
Just to test the technology and put it on pause and say, okay.
No. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
So can you guys see my screen? I'm just trying to test the screen share part of it.
Yep.
Yeah. Anubhav, you can see my PDF. Right?
Yeah,
Now.
I think Daniel is online.
Daniel is online.
Hey, Daniel.
Bingo. There we go.
Hello, Daniel.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Roshni here.
Good, good. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday.
Yeah, no, no problem. Always glad to help out.
Thank you. Daniel, if it's possible to have your video on, we would love to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
problem. I'll just get it working now.
Oh, hi.
Bingo.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you.
No worries.
So I've already been joined by our panelist. We also have Kunal here, who's joining us from London, and my co-host Anubhav. And the
Hey,
rest of the
Daniel.
team.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Daniel. How are you?
Good. Nice to see all the new people coming in. Because which other people do you have that have already graduated that are going to be on today?
I'm here, Daniel. That's Kunal from the S18.
Hey, how are you, Kunal?
Hey,
Nice.
nice to see you.
Likewise.
I don't think we had any overlap though, as far as I remember.
Yeah, you were
a year or so
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you start?
September 18. So.
Oh yeah. So when did we actually finish? I think did we finish? Oh yeah, we finished December 17, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly the time goes.
Yep.
So we have one more panelist, Anderson
see Anderson.
DeMoles. Yeah.
Hi everyone, how are you?
Hey, it's things Anderson.
All
It's
good.
Daniel.
How are you, Daniel?
Daniel here.
Yeah.
Good. Long time no see. How's everything in Dubai?
Exactly. Going good. Yeah, going well. Yep.
You haven't, I presume, because have you been back since you moved over? Have you been back to Europe much?
I haven't. I have been only once, I guess. But yeah, I'm mostly spending my time in Dubai and Saudi Arabia lately. Well, not this year much, but yeah, the past few years, let's say.
But it's pretty rough at the moment when you can't travel.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
even actually, because you know Max, who's living over there.
Yeah.
Because he got out, I think, just before everything went into lockdown. So he was in Germany, so he was actually down to visit in Switzerland a few times. So it was nice to see a familiar face.
Yeah, that's nice. There are a couple of us here in Dubai for now our intake, but I haven't seen them in a while. Also,
yeah, it's tough after a while, I think, to just to find the full time for all that.
Yeah,
because I assume the hours are pretty long on your side, are they?
Yeah, they are. And we are barely in Dubai when we are in projects, and well, when traveling is permitted. So we are spend a lot of time in Saudi, so it's very hard to see each other.
It's definitely the benefit on the private banking side. The hours aren't too bad.
Oh, really? That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I have the permission of the panelists, can I start? Can we begin?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. So just to let you know, Daniel and Addison, we also having this live streamed on YouTube because of the capacity constraints on Zoom. And we also intend to record the session, and it will be up. We have a YouTube channel for this group, so that our friends on the Far East who can't join us live will be able to view it. Right?
Great.
Excellent. No, it's a good. It's a good idea doing stuff like this because it's definitely good before you get started to do a bit of preparation.
Okay. So this is actually the 5th session. So our initial 4 sessions were with students on campus trying to understand how they are managing their studies. So this is, and we have another 4 industry sessions lined up. So this is finance. We have next entrepreneurship, technology and marketing and strategy.
Nice.
Thank you. So today's session is focused on navigating the world of consulting and finance. For this session, we are pleased to be joined on panel by our three distinguished alums. We have Daniel O'Connor from Credit Suisse. He's part of the wealth management and private banking team at Zurich. Welcome, Daniel. Our second guest is Anderson Moles de Matos. He's part of the consulting team at HEC and joins us from its Middle East office in Dubai. Anderson, we really appreciate you joining us today because it's your working day and it with this close call. Thank you so much. We are also joined by Kunal Baghi. He's a digital transformation consultant for BFSI at BCG London. For today's session, we have split our first 60 minutes into three parts. In the first half, we would like to understand a little detail about your individual profiles and overview of wealth management, consulting, and how digital transformation works in fintech. For the second part, we have how do you prepare for these roles at HEC? What are the other criteria? What are the skills that you need for these roles? And the last part is the impact of COVID and what is your post-COVID outlook for these sectors and for opportunities in these sectors. To take this further, I now invite Anubhav. Anubhav?
Thanks for that, Roshni. Hello and a warm welcome to all. Thank you all for joining us today. Just to let the panelists know, currently I believe we have around 40 people on YouTube who are listening to us. So these guys come from various backgrounds, not just finance and consulting, but who are looking at finance and consulting as a post-MBA career path. So I would request the panelists to introduce us, not only in terms of your current designations and pre-MBA experience, but also a little bit about what a typical day of work is for you guys. What kind of assignments do you go through? What are the kind of hours that you have to put in? So maybe Daniel, if you could start with you, followed by Anderson and then Kunal.
No worries. So on the background, as you can probably tell from my accent and second name, I'm from Ireland originally. Probably an easy one. So I had worked as a lawyer originally, and I'd always had the intention of moving into finance, but never realized how tough it is actually to make the bridge. I did a few things. I mean, I'd signed up for some tax consultancy exams. I'd signed up for the CFAs. But I think when I was about 29, I said, look, if I don't make the jump now, then I'm never going to do it. And for me, it was pretty straightforward because I always wanted to live in Paris. So I'd applied to HEC. I mean, I didn't actually do a whole pile of preparation beforehand, didn't look up a whole pile of I just looked at the rankings, saw HEC, saw Paris, thought that sounded good. And then applied to that. And I mean, one thing I can probably cover as well today is that whenever I was doing the MBA, the main reason I was doing it was trying to get into investment banking or private equity, which are probably two of the hardest things to get into. Joined kind of with the ambition of going down that road. And it's one thing I'm sure we'll end up talking about later, but whatever internship you end up doing in the summer, especially if it's an industry that you haven't worked in the future, or you haven't worked in the past, or if it's something with your background is completely different to, then whatever comes in on the internship side of things is a huge advantage to what you end up doing afterwards. Because let's say if you're trying to be a lateral hire in places, it's quite tough. So for me, I had applied for a few places, got the Credit Suisse summer internship in London. That was 10 weeks. It was perfectly fitted to the course. Did that. Wasn't sure how much I liked the work. Then we finished the course in December, worked in a corporate finance firm for 6 months. And then I had the offer the whole time to come over to Zurich, to head office to Switzerland to join Credit Suisse. So then I took the offer and really enjoyed it ever since. But finance is definitely one of the hardest things to break into. If you don't have a background in it, it can be quite tough.
That's really fascinating. Anderson, moving on to you.
Great. Yeah. So Anderson Matos, I'm originally from Brazil. I joined HEC in the January 2017 intake. So I think Daniel was from September 2016. So we did a couple of courses together. That's why we know each other in finance. But yeah, before joining HEC, I actually was a consultant before already. I'm a computer engineer, actually. So I started working a bit with programming for 1.5 years, but then I said, oh, that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I quickly jumped into consulting. In consulting, I worked for Accenture for 2 years, and then I was working at a boutique firm for 3 years doing mostly supply chain management consulting. And then I said, okay, it's time to do an MBA. I was around 30, I think I was 30 years old. Yeah, I was 30 when I joined the MBA. And I went to the MBA mostly because I wanted to do things. So first, I wanted to strengthen my financial background because I didn't know a lot of finance, and I think it's a path for perhaps I want to go into the future. And secondly, because I wanted to leave my country. Let's say I didn't want to stay longer in Brazil because things were deteriorating quite quickly and still not a great place to be in right now. So I wanted to leave abroad. Mostly, I wanted to stay in Paris or Europe overall. So yeah, so these were kind of my two intentions going to the MBA. And when I got to the MBA, what I really wanted was to get an industry job at first. So I was looking for something in France. I had already lived in the country before, but what happened is that quite quickly in the MBA was in September. I don't know if they still do this, but there was like a full week intention that companies go and offer placements, etc. So that's when Kearney was in the office in HEC at that time, and then I did the interviews. It was a very quick process, and I got a full-time offer by October. So and then I said, yeah, okay, I'll go back to consulting, stay a couple more years at least in consulting. It's something I like, something I know, and I will be going to Dubai. It's a place, I mean, I never thought about coming here, honestly, but it's an amazing place. I really like it right now. So I think it was a very good decision that I took. And yeah, so now I'm Kearney. I'm an associate. I joined the company in October 2018. So I'm 1.5 years here. And most of the projects, as I said at the beginning, are in Saudi Arabia. So my daily life is like, well, let's say the daily week is to travel Sunday morning to Saudi and returning on Wednesday afternoon. So at least we got to spend Thursday in the office, but it's a very intense, let's say, time while in Saudi Arabia mostly. But yeah, so this is, I don't want to take much longer. I think that's it.
Sure. Thanks for that, Anderson. Anderson, there seems to be some disturbance on the line. Are we audible to you clearly?
Yeah, I am. Perhaps I will change my mic, maybe.
That's fine. So a real quick follow-up on that, Anderson. You worked in 3 continents, South America, Europe, and now in MENA. That's a lot of diversity in terms of work cultures, businesses, governments. What has that experience been like?
That's something I really like. I think that one of the reasons I went to HEC is because of diversity. This is something I wanted from my course or my MBA, and it's something I could take away very quickly. I mean, I grew up in the Brazilian mostly culture, but I did some part of my undergrad in France already, so I got to know people from different parts of the world when I was about 19, etc. So I think it was something I appreciate to know new cultures. And coming to the Middle East is where even the company here, Kearney, is a very, very diverse type of company. We have more than 40 or 50 nationalities in the office, I guess. So it's almost a continuation of HEC here, I want to say. And yeah, working with Middle Eastern people, I think you have to adapt, but they're very open to international people, etc. So it's a very nice and cultural place here.
Wonderful. Kunal, coming on to you.
Hey everybody. So yeah, from my background point of view, I'm a chemical engineer by my undergrad, and after that I joined HSBC. I think they came to campus and took a math test, and then they recruited a few people. It was just fortunate I ended up in a good place. I did data analytics for HSBC for about 7 years, out of Bangalore, India, where I'm from. A lot of the work there used to be to travel to different countries where HSBC has its offices and help them build their data and analytics capability, right? And what I could see from there was that while data and analytics is a fantastic support tool, right? It wasn't really the business of the bank, right? They were not, that wasn't the priority. So I started looking out to see where can I go where my work has more impact in terms of bottom line impact to the company, right? And one thing that stood out to me was that every role that I looked at that excited me, somewhere in the job description mentioned either you should have an MBA or that's good to have one, right? So that's how I started looking at the MBA. The choice for HEC was actually quite interesting. Me and my wife got married a year before joining HEC, and then we decided to both move to Paris at the cost of doing a short honeymoon. We did like 2 years in Paris, so which is quite exciting, and I really enjoyed my time because of that perspective on it. That I every time I would get some time off on campus, it was the city Paris that always beckoned. Though I must tell you, it is a little bit of a trek from Rion-Josas to Paris. So whenever you guys reach there, it's not a surprise, right? From there, when I came to campus, I came actually with a pretty open mind about it doesn't matter what industry I get into, but I want to get into a company or a role where my work directly adds to the top line and the bottom line of the company, right? That was my perspective. But similar to what Anderson said, in the first few weeks, there's something called the consulting peak week, then finance peak week, and then you have a lot of companies coming on campus and talking to you. That's when I realized that maybe in the stage of the career that I am in, a much broader perspective on what different industries do, different companies do, would be the best value add to me, instead of going into back into a specific industry and taking a very limited view on, because HSBC is like a well, right? You're very well accustomed to where you are, but you only see the world from an HSBC lens. To step out, I think consulting would give me the most broad spectrum. So that's why I picked consulting as a track. And my backup was always going to be in banking services, and fintech was one of the things that was booming at that time. And MasterCard, I was fortunate that MasterCard was looking for somebody to help them expand their fintech sales team. So they had an unofficial intern kind of position, which when I asked them, they were able to make it official and give it to me. So from there, I interviewed with BCG, pretty standard consulting process, and I'm sure we can discuss that later. And I'm in London. I joined on 2nd March, and 13th March, the whole world shut down. What has been interesting is that the work has not stopped. I can vouch with Anderson that the hours and the amount of work and the variety of work has not changed, but the interaction is absolutely different. So I have no background on what Anderson mentioned as traveling on a Monday morning and coming back on a Thursday, or rather, it's slightly different from region to region. But that has not that experience I'm still looking forward to. But otherwise, it's been a pretty cool 6 to 12 weeks.
Fascinating stuff. Kunal, you've all heard great things about the fintech and the digital ecosystem in London. As someone who's right now in the middle of all that action, albeit at home, can you give us a little bit of an insider's take on it, and also maybe contrast it with the ecosystem you found in Paris during your time at HEC and during your internship?
Right. So, to be fair, I haven't done any work with a fintech yet, right? But that's still a passion for me. So I know what's happening here. What you'll see is that London as a city and Paris as a city both stand out very differently in terms of consumer behavior in the fintech space, right? So you almost look at the world as, from this region, you take London, take the rest of UK, you take Paris and the rest of France, right? So what I can see is that I would say about 80% of the market is very similar products, right? Very similar products. You almost sometimes you can find like for like comparisons of each fintech. But there's the other 10 to 20% that solves very local problems, right? Very local customized solutions that they solve for. A simple thing that I can mention to you is like tips, right? In Paris, giving and receiving tips is being solved by a fintech, which is making a lot of money. Same is not working for London, right? And the biggest reason behind that is Paris sees huge amount of American tourists coming, right? So the revenue that you can generate. It's not that people are not using it enough. It's just that the sheer revenue amount that you can generate, which you have a lot of American tourists giving tips, is a lot more. So what you'll see is that they have generic problems being solved, and you have like for like comparisons for each, and then you have these very specific local problems being solved. And what I'm seeing is that it's those fintechs that are more profitable. They may never reach a big size, but they're definitely more profitable than the ones who solve the broad spectrum of problems.
It's really fascinating, Kunal. And I think I can see some parallels of that in India as well.
Yeah.
Glad you brought that up. Daniel, you're based out of Zurich, right? Which is one of the major finance hubs of Europe. How has your experience been in the city?
Good. I mean, it's pretty small compared to other places. I mean, Zurich is only about 600,000 people, whereas London is what is about 12 million, and Paris likewise. I mean, there's probably more things happening in the bigger cities. But I mean, if you're not in London or if you're not in Paris, I mean, Paris, which is quite a tough place to break into career-wise, it is a very, very good option because everything's done here through English. Whereas if you were aiming more towards France, it's a lot more difficult because it's, I don't know. I mean, the other guys can comment on as well, but it's definitely a lot harder to break into the jobs market there. And if you're looking at finance, you're kind of limited to where you can actually look at. I mean, it's kind of London, Switzerland, Paris, maybe parts of Germany, but that's it really.
Interesting.
Yeah, but breaking into Paris is I can vouch for that you got to be really good at what you do, plus your French should be flawless, right?
Exactly.
Both of those work as one, and then there is a little bit of a cultural aspect as well, which you need to get used to. But that's a good part of the journey. It's just language.
And also the salaries are a lot better outside of France, and the tax is lower, which is always a big consideration.
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting. Thanks for that, Daniel and Kunal. I invite Roshni to take us through to the next segment. Hey, Roshni, you there?
Yeah, sorry. So moving to the next part where we try to understand, like you mentioned, you come from a non-finance background or you come from a finance background, but what are the skills that you would typically need for, say, a consultant or for a wealth management or investment banking as you go? Because we also understand that there are specialization phases. So do you pick a specialization which is what your career demands or what is missing in your resume? So if you could just take us through that and tell us, how did the entire HEC experience of clubs, of being part of conferences, being of hosting events, how did that help in the entire process? And I mean, if I can start with you. Sorry, Daniel, you good.
No, work away, Anderson.
Okay. Okay, I can start. I think for consulting, so you don't need any type of specific skills to go into the consulting world, right? I think a lot of people that were in the industry before, they could land consulting jobs afterwards. Of course, that having a consulting experience before, I think it helps through the process, but also once you join the firm, to kind of get used to the consulting quickly, let's say. I think that what I did profit a lot in HEC were there were the consulting clubs where you did the interviews and the interviews rounds, and in the consulting peak week where they brought people to train together. So it's really a week. I think it was the first week of September or something, where you train a lot of cases, etc. So that kind of tools that HEC had helped me a lot. I think since I had already consulting experience, I knew how the cases were, etc. So I had to train a little less, perhaps. But I think that if you're someone who has industry experience and want to go to consulting, I think really training a lot and going to the consulting club and doing this kind of interview training rounds, this is the key to get a job in consulting afterwards. And yeah, I think then it doesn't depend a lot if you're, I mean, in Europe or in the Middle East. For example, the Middle East one, I got a bit by chance, I guess, that they were interviewing in campus, but there are a lot of companies that would be attracted to suggest a placement in Europe as well. So yeah, I think that this were the tools that I use mostly for to train for the interview, for the process overall.
So now that you mentioned that Kearney internship played a big role in trying to get the full-time opportunity. So considering that you're a Jan intake, one of the many conversations that happen is the limited scope of internships that are available to Jan intakes. Would you want to comment on that, and how did you what was your experience and that of your batchmates?
Yeah. So for internships, I didn't do an internship myself. I was planning to do an internship, but in an industry. So I wouldn't do an internship in consulting. I think the internship for January intake is mostly for people that want to career transition. So to get some experience in a new field. Now, if you already have experience in consulting, that was my case, and would have only like a limited 6-month internship period, I don't think any company would be willing to take me. And on the other hand, also, I didn't have a very strong argument to make the internship. So for January, I think that for consulting, the really way is not through the internships before. Of course, if you land internship, it's a plus, of course, but I don't think it's the key factor to get a job in consulting overall. And from my batch, I think there was only one person who did internship and then got an offer later on. I think he went to Bain, Japan. But yeah, there are not a lot of cases of people who had to do an internship to get a consulting job afterwards, for the January intake at least.
Just taking off of that, just segueing from there a little bit into the internship piece, right? But the way I looked at it was, an internship gives the employer 2 opportunities to screen you. They interview you, they like you, they bring you, they see how you work, and they still screen you at the end into the internship, right? So my recommendation, at least from a consulting point of view, is to do the internship if you want to test out consulting, right? Yeah. If you already know and you're convinced by it, I would almost recommend don't do that. Spend that time doing something that will really add more value to you, because at the end of the day, the internship route is actually much harder, because you'll be competing for much smaller slots with a lot bigger crowd. And even after, once you get in, the employer still has the option to say, sorry, right? And then you have to do the whole process twice. It's not easier to get an internship than a full-time offer. I wouldn't think it is. So that's another perspective.
I fully agree.
I think it just depends. I mean, it's easier definitely when you're doing the September intake. It's a lot easier because for us, I mean, you can structure your electives that you will have a 10-week gap, where if you weren't doing the internship, you wouldn't have anything really to do. And like it fits in very nice with September, the internship. And as the guy said, it's a great opportunity to try and break into a new industry, or to try something that you don't know. I mean, I talked to someone before that I think she was interested in consulting, did an internship, didn't like it, and ended up going to Amazon afterwards. So it's a good chance to dip your toe in the water. And I suppose, I mean, that's what the whole course is. It's kind of, when you're 20 or 21, you're probably not mature enough really to think about your future career. And this is probably the only time in your life where you'll get a year or 16 months where you can take a bit of a step back and say, what exactly is it that I'd like to do going forward. And it really is a case of just trying new things and testing things out.
That's an interesting point you make, Daniel, because I know for myself, we all look at internship as one step before being able to convert it full time. But like you said, if you could also be used to see whether that's what you want to do, which is, I think, makes sense here. And I would want to bring this here as well, that considering that the current situation, we see that, and we've been speaking to current students as well. So the internship opportunities are also reducing. What would be your advice, wherein you're in a situation where you really don't have that, flexibility to pick and choose, or you don't really have the opportunity to probably do an internship? So what else would be your thinking on that?
Good question. I mean, it's even just to take a bit of a step back, when you're looking when you're looking at the MBA, you have very, very different parts of it. And I mean, the main three parts that you have, or the main things you get, is that you have the coursework, you know, which is all the things that you're learning, which at times can be, depending on your background, can be pretty intense. Then you have the social side of things, because obviously when you're there, you're meeting new people, you're living in a new city, so you want to make the most out of it. And then on the third point, there's actually getting a job. And all three things don't really go hand in hand with each other. And it can be quite a tough thing to balance them all. And, you know, if you can't do the internship, then it's probably a good time to try and allocate more time to something else. So we'll say if you can't, even though the course is, what is it, 16 or 18 months, even though the course is that long, the time goes pretty quickly, because, you know, if you start in the September intake, before you know it, it's Christmas. You know, because you're getting to know new people, you're doing things in the city, and you're working. And, you know, like a lot of the, especially if you're going to finance, a lot of the internships there are tied up very, very early. So some of those internships are already closed by November. So you have to have your applications in within the first month or two. And if it's an area you haven't worked in, that can be quite tough. So it's really a case of trying to balance those things. So if, we'll say, you can't do a summer internship, then you should really use that time to try and network. I mean, just talk to people on the phone and see exactly what you can do to line up for the long term. And it's also a good thing. It's great to have a bit of time before the course, to dedicate a bit of time now to make it easier to balance those three things when you're doing the course. And a good example is, I mean, for me, I didn't really talk to too many people that had done MBAs beforehand. And the people I had talked to maybe were engineers, because I know it's probably 60-70% of the class come from engineering backgrounds or things like that. And a huge amount of the first half of the course is based on that. So for me, the first 6 months was like really a case of playing catch up. I mean, even for example, we had a financial markets class, and we were assigned a group exercise, and I never realized that you could use Excel to do calculations, which the 4 engineers I was working with nearly fell off their chairs after hearing that. And it's those kind of things that, you know, whenever I first started, I was playing such, I hadn't touched anything to do with numbers in about 10 years, I think. And suddenly you're playing catch up on that. So if you can kind of have a bit of a flavor of some of the things you should be catching up on beforehand, it makes the coursework a lot easier at the start. And then you can dedicate more time at the start to looking for things on the career side, or spending more time socially as well, which is also very important. And I think it's really just trying to balance those three things, but then also not forgetting that the main reason that you're there is to get a job out of it at the end. And I mean, even if you come first in the whole class, I mean, if you're the top person in HEC for the year, obviously it looks good on the CV, but you know, you also need to dedicate a lot of time towards the career side of things.
Yeah. Daniel, it's interesting you say that, because we know that you actually fought an election for the MBA Council, so, and you led an MBA Council. So that's like a good amount of work. So when you say managing coursework, managing networking, managing the council work, so how did you do that? Can you take us to that experience of the election?
Well, I mean, so some things will always have to suffer. That's the problem. I mean, some people, maybe their backgrounds, they're probably more predisposed to be able to juggle all the different things, or certain parts are easier. And you know, on the election side, whenever we were doing that, I probably knew that some of my grades would have taken a hit. You know, there were specific things where I probably should have been doing more work at the time, but I was more interested in putting the work into that. And it's one of the things actually with the September intake, that if you're in the January intake, which is smaller, there's generally no election process, or it's not as common, because there's not enough people in the thing, and there's generally about 15 to 20 people that end up running. But when you have the September class, which is 160, then you have more people, so then it's more likely to be contested. And you know, I mentioned it earlier that the MBA is a great chance to try new things, and it's a great chance to do things that you never would have done, that I never would have done before. And when I was doing my interview for HEC, the guy who was interviewing me, he said, "Oh, I see that you've written a few of your essays about politics." He said, "You know, they have a council, they have these elections, you should try and run for that." And it's probably an Irish thing, but people don't really like putting themselves forward for things. They're always a bit shy on that. And then whenever we were doing the course, you know, the line he said to me is, "Look, it's people in your class. If you win or you lose, who cares?" But he said it's a good chance to do it. And it's those type of things that, you know, when you're doing the course, you know, take the chance to do these type of things and do things that you wouldn't normally otherwise. Between those three segments, one thing you'll always suffer. You know, so if you want to be top of the class, probably means you can't go out as much. If you want to go out a lot, then maybe your grades aren't going to be as good. So it's just balancing all those things. And obviously, the council took up extra time. But you know, for me, I definitely learned a lot out of that, about delegation. Learned a lot about you know, having other people working under you. Made lots of mistakes. Did lots of things afterwards where I would have done better. But by the same token, you know, what's the one? Is you pick up just so much by actually doing the thing in practice, that I probably learned more even on the trying to do the election side of things that I would have learned out of half the classes. So it's to try and take these things that you're interested in the course and then make the most out of them.
Yeah, I'm sure that really aided your in contributing to the kind of leader that you would be. So that adds to the leadership skills as well. Kunal, coming to you, we know that you also did a lot of heavy lifting when you were part of the HEC consulting practice. And Director, could you share something more on that? How did you manage that with coursework?
I think that you can add one more item to Daniel's trifecta. It's sleep. Right?
Yeah.
So social, sleep, studies, and your jobs at the end of it, right? Those are the 4 and 1, and they will suffer. Two out of those 4 will always suffer. I actually made an active decision in my first term not to commit to anything, right? So actively stayed out of the election process, actively stayed out of the MBAT process. Regretted that one a little bit later. But I actively stayed out of a lot of that. I said, I put myself in the shoes of somebody who's here to take from the system initially before giving back. So I actually spent the first term attending a lot of the club events, a lot of the talks, a lot of the sessions. We had some great speakers. In fact, one of the last few public appearances of Carlos Ghosn was supposed to happen, and I should say in my batch.
Wow.
So it did happen, but
okay.
You know, so and it was building up. So I was there in all of these, participating in it. So in the first term, I made an active choice to almost stay out of it. I focused on the social and the networking side, and that helped me get the internship. And Daniel is very right in saying that for finance, the internships close out by November, and consulting, the internships sort of close out by Jan. Like you'll have the interviews in Jan. So my focus was around that. I wanted to spend the summer in Paris, and for me to be able to do that, I wanted to have an internship in the summer. Otherwise you're on a holiday, right? So yeah, so it's a matter of making that choice. Like I said, mine was not a perfect choice. If I had a chance to redo that, I would probably at least do one, either the MBAT or the council. I would do that. But you have to decide, and I was there to explore. So I thought, okay, let me spend a few months exploring before I pick one up. Honestly, the consulting practice was not, I wouldn't say it was too much of a workload. Most clubs are a lot smaller when compared to the council and the MBAT.
Anderson, if I could bring you here, we know you're part of 2 clubs, consulting, which in itself is a lot of work, and you're also part of the French Connection Club. So how did you go about it? And you're from a Jan intake, which is already crux for time. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think I had a similar approach as Kunal. I was just exploring in the first semester and didn't really commit to any club to really support, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do actually in terms of work. I didn't know if I want to go to consulting, so I don't want to commit to consulting. I don't know if I want to commit to marketing, or I don't know, there was an industry club or energy, etc. So I didn't commit to any club. I think it was later in the second semester the second semester of the year, where I didn't have actually a role in the consulting club, so was more utilizing things that people were doing, let's say. So it was using the resources they're putting into place. So I didn't have a lot of work there. Now in the French Connection Club, this is something I joined in the second semester, and this is part of the will that I had to stay in French. So I wanted to practice more my French as well. And then we did trainings. I think that's something that still exists, that you do presentations for classes, you organize like French dinners, French, I don't know, go out, or French wine tasting nights, etc. So this was kind of the work, but it was more what was less from like a professional part, let's say. It was not from a work part, it was more from entertainment, like face, and get to know more French culture, etc. So this was a role that I had, and actually it wasn't a lot of workload in the club either. So in terms of club, and this is something perhaps I regret a bit, is that I didn't participate enough in the clubs. Something that I wish I could have participated more was in the MBAT itself, because I'm very into sports. But I didn't take an action back at that time, and I don't know why exactly. I think it was May, so I think it's because I was still worried. No, I'm not here to do MBATs. I'm here to find a job, etc. So perhaps that's why I didn't go into MBAT. But if I can give an advice, is that you really join a club and try to take like a more responsibility kind of role inside the clubs. I think the work that you have from HEC, it's a lot in the first part, which is the core, but I think you can conciliate both things, being part of a club and doing the mandatory HEC stuff, let's say.
The French Connection Club was my most favorite one. I think the raclettes and the wine tastings, and just the opportunity to talk in French. When you're not under pressure, right? You're in a class, it's very different. And you're talking to your buddies, you really learn French then.
Yeah.
You may not be able to give an interview.
Yeah.
I wouldn't but you do learn a lot of useful French.
Very good. We did like the lunch also, speaking French with people. That's something I hope still lives on. Yeah. That's
till December last year. Yes, Amit. It was a popular club, and you had the lunches and dinners all on it. Yeah.
That's nice.
And if I'm not wrong, I think the French Connection Club had its meetings in the P bar. Is that right? Always.
Yeah.
Good place.
Anderson, you should say that. I mean, I was just saying.
Sometimes I don't remember. I don't think it was in my batch, I guess. I think it's something new, but yeah.
So at least for the most recent batch, I mean, when I was there till December last year, the idea was to start the conversation somewhere on campus, and you ended with wine at P bar. So it wasn't just P bar, but that was the highlight. Yes. So when people would start entering P bar on a Thursday, the French club would be there to welcome them. Right?
That's nice.
So the bottom line is that it is for each of us to decide how do we balance this, and we obviously can't give 100% to everything. So finding it across, trying to find a balance between all three is really the crux of it. Can I call on Anubhav now to really take forward to our next question, which is on how do you prepare for your final job search and employment? Anubhav?
Surely. So I think quite simply, what we'd love to know is, how did you zero in on the companies you wanted to target? And, more importantly, how did you reach out to them? How did you connect with them? Because, you're in the middle of all of this, for zero in the profiles that you like. And there are so many companies out there. What was the mental map that you had made and the process that you undertook to come to that? So maybe we can start with Kunal.
Okay. From my point of view, I think it wasn't a company. Right? I never looked at it from that point of view. I had looked at about 5 to 6 companies that I really wanted to work at, right? Because it's very rare that you actually understand the DNA of a company just by hearing about it, right? So I had taken 5 consulting firms and 5 banks, but not in terms of hardcore finance, retail banks or fintechs, right? I had shortlisted them and said, these are my dream. And then I had like 5 backup in each category and 5 as I was sure I would get there, right? In my mind, right? So it's all in my mind. So what I basically did was I said, okay, that's about 30 companies, and I should speak to at least 2 people from these companies before I apply. Chalk out an Excel, which tells me when are they most likely to recruit, when are they most likely to talk to you, and stuff like that. And kind of a little bit of pre-work on that. I did this sometime in September, the month I joined. It is a little bit. It's not the best part of your MBA doing this, the planning and trying to figure out. But what I found was that the more I stuck to this plan, the better I did. And because a lot of it is not just got to do with whether you are the right candidate for the job, but it's a lot of it with consulting and with banks is to it. You need to do it at the right time, right? The application cycles are very strict. They don't do too much of lateral hiring from outside the industry, right? So you need to make sure that you're in sync with their university cycles. You've spoken to enough people to really understand the DNA of these companies, because a lot of the questions that you need to answer is why that company, why you, and why specifically that office or that particular function. You need to be able to answer these questions in an authentic manner, which is not simple. You can't look at the website and just do that. And especially what I found on finance, and maybe Daniel, you can correct me on this. On the finance side, it was also important that I picked the right specialization, because I didn't have a finance. I was not trained in finance before this, right? So I had to make sure I picked the right specialization. But I found that consulting, on the other hand, didn't have that sort of a restriction, right? So that's why I took the finance specialization, keeping in mind that I didn't do consulting. And overall, I found that case cracking was super important for the consulting firms. There's a very cookie cutter format, at least for the first rounds, where to just get considered. And the consulting clubs and the career forums do a good job of making you familiar with it. But those are like, they're like sports, right? People can explain to you the rules of the game, but till you don't play it, till you don't actually do a few one-on-ones, play a full court basketball game, you don't know what it really takes. So it's got to do with your practice. All the tools are there. All the tools are there, and I still maintain the fact that any one of my HEC classmates had the ingredients required to get the job that they wanted. It was just the application of those, how often you practice and how committed you were to it, and timing. Right? If you miss the boat on a job, that's the worst you can do to yourself. And the other is making sure you practice, because of all other things that you spoke about, MBAT, council, campus. Those are a lot more fun than looking for a job. They're a lot more fun. You'll see your batch is one of the best set of people you'll meet. You'll make great friendships. You will learn different ways of celebrating and different ways of being angry at each other. But that's a lot more fun part of the MBA. So it's just a matter of getting that discipline and saying, okay, I will have this time, which is just specifically to get the job. Because I don't know what the fees for you guys was. It's like 70K for us. So we're like, it's that job is going to help us pay you back from the loan, right? So yeah. Sorry,
it's tough. It's tough as well on the job hunt side of things, because if you're doing other things, like if you're doing the social side of stuff, or if you're doing if you're studying for an exam or whatever it is, you'll get something positive out of it. And the problem that you have on the job hunt side of things is that, like, I'll give you a good example. There was a guy in my class, and I didn't see him socially for a long time. And I know for the internship, he had applied, because he showed me the list, he'd applied for, I think, 49 different places. And then he got the last one, which was a fantastic job. And like, he got the full-time job out of it. But I mean, he spent so much time working on that. And it's like, it's hard, because if most people go into work straight after college, then they're kind of, straight into it, and you're kind of not used to, say, to getting rejections. But when you're in an MBA, you're competing against, depending on the sector, but I mean, you've got a few thousand other people doing the exact same thing in the rest of Europe, applying for the same jobs, and there's a lot of competition for it. So you have to, I mean, you really have to set aside some time to work on that, and definitely to start as early as you can on applying for things. And try as well not to spread yourself too thin, because if you reach out to anyone that's been to HEC, especially on the MBA side, they'll help you. And if you need a referral, but try not to do too much of a scattergun approach. Really, it's easier if you know what you want to do, because if you're calling 50, 100 people and you're just speaking to them once and seeing what they can do for you, mightn't do that much. Whereas if you're just interested in doing finance, and if you kind of focus on a handful of people, I think they'll really help you, and they'll also tell you exactly what they have to do to get over the line. And it makes a difference. I mean, even to give you an example, there was 2 people that were applying for the Credit Suisse internship that had contacted me through LinkedIn, and for both of them, I talked them through exactly what you need to say in the interviews, and both of them got internship offers out of it. Just because when you're in it, you know exactly what you need to say, you know what needs to be covered, and it's to make sure that you avail of that resource out there.
And if you end up spreading yourself too thin, it shows in the quality of conversation you have with the alum.
Yeah.
You will not be able to understand 100 companies, their DNA, and what's needed from them. It's not humanly possible. So it shows.
I think that's a really good piece of advice, because too often you hear that you'll be making 150 applications. I think this is really, really relevant, that keep the focus on the applications that you want to do and build quality connections in those aspects. Real quickly, Kunal, I'll take you to a very specific question. In the post-Brexit world, is it true that it's very challenging for expats to break in? And how was your experience as a non-EU expat?
So that's I was going to say that, right? The opportunities are all there, right? The opportunities have not moved out. I also would have thought that a lot more would have moved to Paris. It so far has not moved. It could be very different for you guys, because you're going to be looking at jobs 18 months, and that's 12 months after the actual Brexit has happened. So it could be very different, but so far there hasn't been that much of an exodus of jobs. I find that my experience with most countries has been that it's got to do with the company you're applying to, right? The government is not discouraging you from coming in. It's simply telling you there's a different route. If you are from the EU, or if you're not from the EU, there is different routes to get in. But if you get the right company, so if you get a good bank, you get a good consulting firm, you get one of the big tech companies, you get a startup which the government is supportive of, you will not have any issues, either from an immigration point of view, or from a salary point of view, or help in integrating in the first few weeks, right? So that's my experience so far, that it's the organization that whether they want you don't want you, and then it's easy, right? I don't see any issues in my day-to-day life in London with Brexit. I've been here before Brexit, I've been here after, and I think it's primarily because, like I said, London and Paris are different from the rest of the UK and the rest of France, right? It's not the same at all. So I would say the opportunities are all there. I also don't see too many people, at least in the kind of jobs that we are going to be looking at, and the kind of work that we are going to be. I don't see too many people worried about Brexit. They don't intend to move their houses simply because some immigration policies have changed. I don't see that happening. I do see that in some of the other sectors, yes, but not the MBA crowd doesn't see too much of a difference because of Brexit. That being said, COVID-19 might do some damage to those prospects, yes, because just overall slowdown. But that's a more cyclical thing. But just Brexit, I don't see that impacting the MBA students too much, because you already have very small base of jobs, and those are very niche jobs, and you'll be fine.
I don't know. This is again for the entire panel. Can you take us through some of the key rounds of interview that you had to go through? How did you prepare for it? And if you had the benefit of hindsight, how differently would you have prepared for it, knowing how the process panned out? So maybe you can start with you, Anderson.
Yeah, sure. So I'll focus on the Kearney interview. So the way it worked is, so they came to campus, and we had a first round of interviews with 2 people on campus. So I think the process has changed already. I know for sure that it has changed, but in my case, it was 2 in the same day, 2 persons in the same day. And then we were invited for a second round of interviews with a partner and with HR. So that's about 3 interviews, but the interview with the partner was really very quick. So it was like a 2-day kind of process. I had to go two times. Well, they came to campus once, so I actually went to office only another time to interview for the last round and with HR. So the process overall was very quick. It was like 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, I had the answer already. I know that Kearney back at that time, they were very on a rush, I guess, to hire people. So that's why I think the process was very, very fast. Nowadays, I think it should last like 1.5 months to 2 months. It didn't change a lot. So Kearney is usually very quick, let's say, in terms of the interview process. In my case, what I would have done differently is that I think I would have prepared more with more case cracking cases. I think for a consulting interview, that's it's really, you have to prepare with 50 plus cases overall done with people, live cases. Well, now I think it's everything is online. So like to do online cases with people 50 plus, and I did only about 15, or I didn't do enough, I guess. That's something I should have done more. I should have done more for sure.
Interesting. What was your experience like, Kunal, in terms of the interview process?
So BCG was a little different in the sense. So there's a. So you got to. I mean, I would say that you have to. In reality, you need to understand that most companies will have target schools and non-target schools. So the way they will, a lot of times that your timing will depend on that, right? So I'm assuming that HEC before this was not a big target school for BCG London. We got in a couple of alums in the year before us, and then they were able to really get the wheels moving towards us. So it was really interesting to see it from that point of view. I got my result in 10 minutes, right? So the way it worked for me was I had a round 1 in the Paris office, which was online through WebEx, and very similar process of case cracking. Like it's a 45-minute interview. You have 10 minutes of your background, their background, 20 minutes of the case, another 10-15 minutes of fit, right? I had 2 rounds of that on one day in Paris. And because the office is much closer, London is much closer than Dubai, I think they managed to take the shortlisted candidates, 3 of us to the London office. And then we had a whole day of interviews, which kind of works out about 4 interviews. 1 with the HR and 3 with partners, and I think in some cases there were even some principals, right? So they had those 3 cases. Again, the slight difference in the format, I would say, is that when you're in the first few rounds, you have people like me, maybe a consultant or a project leader or a case leader, somebody taking their interview. So it's very much within the format. It abides by the format a lot. When we got to the partner round and the principal rounds, it was really testing how you think and how you solve and how you communicate. Right? It wasn't as rigid in terms of format, right? And so I gave my interview. My interviews got over at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, and 5:10, 5:15, they called me and said that all 3 of us, the 3 of us who interviewed from HEC, got it. And then we later found out that the Friday was when they're having all their new hires come in for like a weekend with BCG, right? So I basically came in and I didn't have enough wardrobe for my first interaction with.
Wow.
With
that would have been an
BCG.
exciting.
So I stayed back. Don't get me wrong. I stayed back and I had a lot of fun. But literally, I think I got the job 20 minutes before they had to finalize the guest list for the event next day, right? So it was interesting from that point of view. But I would again double up on Anderson's point. You have to do a lot of cases depending on how good you're with. Anderson probably did consulting before, so he understood what it looks like, right? But if you are not from that background, you have to put in a lot of time. I found there's a portal called Prep Launch that helped me a lot because you had to do one-on-one cases from somebody who doesn't know you and will most probably never meet you again. So they will be honest. They have nothing. Your batchmates can end up being a little soft just because they don't want to hurt your feelings, right? And then you probably have to see the person again and have dinner with them. So you can't tell them that you stammer too much and your accent is, I can't understand what you're saying. You can't say that to your batchmates. Prep Launch was really good. It was very honest, at times brutal, sometimes unnecessarily brutal, depending on which university, what kind of person you will get paired with. But that was really, really important. I can't say much on the finance recruitment side. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe Daniel, you can pitch in here. How was your experience like?
Yeah, on the finance side, they'll generally start off with like the first interview a lot of times will be a bit more of a general fit, and there'll be kind of more general finance questions. But if you're through to second or third round, I mean, they'll really grill you, and that's why it can be difficult sometimes if the interviews are very earlier in the year, because they want to pick someone that they like, and sometimes if you have a very interesting background, it's maybe not as important, but in some of the cases, they'll really grill you on the technical side of things. I mean, an example for me was that I was in a third round with an investment bank in London, and I had to do a modeling test. And my modeling at the time was so-so, but I think I was given, I'm trying to think how many pages were in the thing. It was the 10K, maybe there was 1,000 pages in the book. All the filings, all the like analyst reports, and then you had 3.5 hours and 2 laptops to try and do the financial modeling for the next few years and do best and worst case scenario. So that's very much what I was going back to earlier, is that if you have a good idea of what you want to do, if you want to be a consultant, definitely start working on some of the case cracking now. If you really want to go down finance, get yourself up to speed on the accountancy side of things, and also start looking at things like financial modeling, because the thing will come around very, very quickly. And what actually happens a lot of times is that people that end up going into investment banking are people that will have come from finance in the background, that they've already done it, and they're just using this to upgrade to a bigger bank or a bigger boutique. So when you're up against those guys, you really need to know what you're doing. And then, like on the wealth management side, a lot of that was about fit. Because for our job, a lot of my job is, half is probably doing investments and linking up people with different parts of the bank, but then the other half is actually getting work, and it's going out and getting clients, which means that generally if you're covering a market, you generally have to be from there. And with that, it's a lot more fit. They're like, how do they like you? How do they think you'll be able to bring in clients? They'll ask you for a business plan. So it's a lot more on the soft skills when it comes to that side. But for finance, you really need to know your stuff. And actually, I'll tell you something interesting, and it just leads me to one other point, because there was one thing that I wanted to say. Everyone that's doing the MBA is going to be clever, and there's going to be different levels inside there. And the one mistake that I see lots of people doing is that there's kind of I think they think that if they're going into this course that they need to be bossy, and that they need to if they're working in a group, that they need to try and take over the group, and they need to make sure that their voice is heard. But when you're doing the course, you're doing it with people that are coming from different backgrounds, people with different experiences, and you should really try and, like, if you're working in teams, listen to what other people are saying, and that's really where you learn a lot. And even for me at the start, there were certain areas where I thought that I was going to be good at, and I probably didn't listen as much as I should at the time. But you should really always be open and not be be working on a collaborative approach. And a good example is for the Credit Suisse interviews. One of the things that they do is once you pass the first round, I think they fly 60 or 70. They weed out a lot of people at the start, and then they take about 60 or 70 people to London, and then they pick 10 from that. And one of the things that you do some interviews, then they break you into a group of 10. And they do something like they'll put a whiteboard in the corner, and you're meant to very high level brainstorm some finance things. And you'll find that some people get very aggressive with trying to be the person that's writing on the whiteboard. And actually, someone told me in the year before me, someone else from HEC told me that 2 people actually ended up arguing because one person got the pen, someone from INSEAD, I think, and then a person from another college tried to take it off them. And the whole purpose of the test is to see how you work in a group, and to see whether you can get on with people or whether you'll try and be too bossy. And it's funny, I mean, even when I did it, there was people, because you'll have a director from Credit Suisse, and then you'll have 10 of us around the table, and a few people were making negative comments about other people, thinking that maybe it was doing their chances better. But I mean, as soon as you do that, you're more or less being disqualified. But it was an interesting thing to see.
Fascinating.
I would say that the HEC, at least of the course that I saw, very amicable bunch of people. Right? It's not the typical, I'm going to be out there, there'll be this. So I think most people avoid mean, follow Daniel's advice and avoid it, and then you end up having a very nice cohort. It's
Exactly.
especially when I see it with some of the other schools, I find that HEC cohorts are a lot more glued in and amicable.
Interesting. Thanks for that,
So,
Daniel. I think it's a good time to segue into the next segment of post-COVID implications. Roshni, can you take over?
Yes. So actually, I had a follow-up question here for Daniel. So, like you mentioned, that there are a lot of target schools which are traditionally known for finance, right? Which is not really, HEC may not be one of the top ones. So how do companies perceive HEC in comparison to that? Is there a differentiation between, okay, you're from X college or you're from Y college, and does it reflect only at the entry level, or do you see that as you progress in your career as well?
Well, the best thing about HEC, if you're doing finance, is that the Masters in Finance is #1 in the world at the moment. And I mean, has been in the top 2 for the last 15 years. So what's a big thing is, if you get into a place, it definitely helps getting in, of course, because people will say, we'll compare the MBA with the Masters in Finance, because the college only runs 4 or 5 courses. And there's a huge French contingent in London. And you'll find that there's a huge amount of people that are very high up in finance who've gone through HEC. So, and even it happens with clients where as soon as they hear that you've gone to HEC, immediately they're very impressed. Probably where it's more difficult, and this goes back to very much practical considerations. If you want to work in London and if you want to work in finance, there's a big difference. Like, they can walk around the corner and go to London Business School. If there's, we went to an open day in Moelis, which is a boutique investment bank in London, for a day visit, and they're probably a 5-minute walk from London Business School. So it's very easy for them, to meet up with someone who's trying to network with them. Very easy for them to recruit from there, and that's definitely a disadvantage that you have if you're looking to get into a place like London. But no, the college is very, very positively reviewed in the finance side.
Can I ask the consultants if that's the same in consulting as well? Do you see one college favored over the other?
Anderson, why don't you take a stab at it, and
I think that most recently with the rankings, HEC climbing up, I think companies or consulting companies are having a different view on HEC, but I think that in the past 3 years, just after I graduated, so that Kearney was not considering HEC anymore for the associate position, at least in the Dubai office. I don't know how that is elsewhere, because they had other target schools for consulting. So mostly in Europe and INSEAD, I think INSEAD and LBS only in Europe. But I think with the rankings going up, there's no reason why not to consider HEC, and I think it's something that we are trying to work internally also in Kearney to make HEC again a target school for the company. I think for other consulting firms, it should be similar to what Kearney. What do you think, Kunal?
No, yeah, so if you look at where the consulting offices are in London and where the bank's offices are in London, LBS is very close by. It's literally, and you almost share the same bars and the same coffee shops, and you might even bump into each other there, right? So proximity to these markets helps some of the schools. I think from a brand point of view, HEC is considered fantastic. I don't see that as a problem. The brand is not the problem. What I have found of late is that it's operationally, companies would prefer to go to INSEAD because INSEAD has about 1,000 students to offer to be interviewed. So if I'm looking to hire 5 people, and if I go to INSEAD, I will have 1,000 resumes to select from, and I will most likely go back with 5, right? I might have to do an extra day for a smaller school, not smaller from ranking or smaller from quality, just smaller from cohort point of view, and only get 1 or 2 people out of it, right? So I think what I found the batch after me, what they did was they started having, sort of tying up with the INSEAD consulting clubs and things that are having combined events and combined ways of networking. So once the networking starts, I think then it's okay. Then the wheels spin. It's the networking piece and getting the first round of getting a date for the applications, which is the key. After that, the wheels spin, right? Okay. So because if I want to network as a company, I want to go to the broadest base. schools that offer that broader space will be preference, or the schools which are around the corner. So that's how it will work. I think HEC, the rankings are doing it a big, helping it out a lot. But I also feel the students and the career committees have found now more innovative ways of engaging with the companies. And now this year, especially if everything is going to be virtual, I don't see any reason why they would prefer one over the other. It will be a matter of, it will be different. So there's a good chance to build that rapport, because now they can't go to any other school. They have to go, they can open an online forum and everybody is then equally welcome. So it's kind of democratized in one way and tougher in another way.
So that can actually work in our favor, the upcoming batches.
So keep in mind that the same difficulties that some of the other schools face now, they will also be able to do this, right? There are the other most European business schools are not massive. There's 100, 200 people, 250 people maybe. They're not huge, right? And also what digital might do is might open up more geographies. So I wouldn't necessarily say it is all good, but it democratizes the process, which can help you. Otherwise, it'll be traditionally it'll be much harder.
Thanks. So moving on to one last segment before our Q&A, which is the impact of COVID. I think it's a topic that we cannot avoid in these times. So both, this is to all three of you. All your roles involve a lot of client interaction. It involves, sitting face to face with the client, building trust and confidence before you actually close the deal. And especially, Daniel, in your case, where it's private wealth management, high net individuals. So how has the relationship with the client changed? On a Zoom call, it's definitely not the same. So how you manage and how have the clients taken that approach?
Yeah, it's a massive pain in the ass. I mean, the main thing over the past while was that obviously all the stock markets were down, so that was we were all kept extremely busy with that over the past while. The hardest part with it really is generating new business, because when you're not able to travel, you always find that when you're meeting people face to face, that's when things come up. That's when someone will ask you about some kind of financing, some deal, or maybe they're working on something and they want to bounce some ideas off you. That's generally where it'll happen. So yeah, no, it's frustrating for us, and there's very, very little way to replicate that. The only thing you can really do is, when you're not traveling as much now, and whenever there's so much trouble in the markets, you just have to try and compensate maybe by doing a better job on that, or giving more attention to that side of things. But especially for our work, it is a massive pain.
Okay. One of the positive outcomes, if I could say positive, is that it has brought a lot of discussion on sustainable investing, and I know Credit Suisse has taken a leadership in that. So do you really see any change on the ground in terms of where your clients want to put their money in?
Yeah, I mean, you found that there was actually, whenever I first started, I didn't hear anyone asking anything about any ESG investments. And it was pretty funny that then in the space, was it last summer, I think? Around last summer, I forget, there was a certain point, and suddenly I had 3 or 4 people in the space of a week or two who were in contact, seeing what they had. Anyway, I mean, everything is very much going towards that direction. The difficulty that you have at the moment is the average economic cycle is about 10 years, 7 or 8 years up, and then 2 years down. And what you've had now is it's just been going up for 11, 12 years. So there's just the difficulty that we have on the work side is, there's always investments at the moment that are on the sustainability side, but now it's just trying to get returns for people, because interest rates are negative in a lot of countries. America's gone back down to 0. And when you have that, you obviously have there's a bit of a mismatch in terms of the amount of risk people are willing to take for investments. So it's just, you really have to work a lot harder to make sure investments work for people without giving them more. I mean, some people are very high risk anyway, so it's okay, but you really just have to work a lot more to find the solutions. But for us, it's not too bad, because there's 50,000 people working in Credit Suisse. So if you need most things, I mean, you've got such a big back office, and you've got people covering every different part. So if you need anything, you can just call up some area, and they can do a lot of the legwork for you.
Yeah, that's true. So, Anderson is also dealing with another problem other than COVID. You're also dealing with low oil prices coming. So how I'm sure all your clients are in a foul mood. So how do you manage that over Zoom?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's something that I was more concerned about before. Well, at the beginning when the oil really crashed the prices, I think we had around 3 months of stoppage of like proposals and wins, etc. So I think March, April, and May were very bad months in terms of new jobs, let's say. And also in terms of projects, I think almost a quarter of our projects were stopped because the clients wanted us on their site, right? So they didn't want us working remotely. Yeah. But as they saw, well, this is something that will carry on for a couple more months, I guess, in the region. And most of our projects and all the companies here are in Saudi Arabia, actually, and they have this target of their vision 2030, where they have to deliver the projects anyway. So it doesn't matter a lot. Well, of course, if the oil prices are very low, they're going to stop some things, but they're not stopping everything. Otherwise, they can't transform the country. So I think the outlook is much better. So we have a lot of recent wins and businesses picking up again, and we are experiencing actually a growth with let's say against 2019. So it's a positive thing, and it's I still don't fully understand why, because the oil prices are really half the prices that were before the crisis. But the clients are still buying projects. I think that's something that the region overall, they need the consultants, they need the jobs. So it didn't have a huge impact in the consulting business.
Anderson, but another very important thing is negotiation, right? And in the Middle East, we know how it is that you really have you have a language barrier, you have a cultural barrier. So that's like, especially Saudi Arabia, because I'm from Dubai, so I understand that it's much more harder. UAE is far more open than Saudi. So how do you break that barrier? How do you know what the person in front is thinking, or it's like there's no endless rounds of power that is happening. Right? So how do you manage that?
That's a good question. I've been interacting with a new client recently also, and it's a very different kind of situation for sure. I think they're also trying to adapt to this remote working, where usually you would meet the person, and it's a very it's not a very personal kind of relationship you have to build trust, etc. So it was very harder, but I think they are being more open to that recently. And from this new client I'm working with, I'm kind of talking more to them kind of in a more personal way, let's say, faster than if I was in their offices in Saudi. I don't know if it's the technology is making us change our cultures a bit quicker, but I think it hasn't changed a lot. Now, in terms of closing the deals, that's more in the partner level, where you actually have to sign and have to take the tea with the Saudis, just say, okay, let's discuss and do like more of this personal relationship. I think they're doing a good job, and the technology is helping to connect faster. Actually, that's helping them sell the projects and keep work going on.
Thank you. Kunal, you work with digital transformation. So there's so many transformations happening. Do you want to come in here?
So my area of interest is digital transformation. When you join a consulting firm, you don't typically choose a specialization.
Okay.
You do it at about 2 years into the process, right? That being said, I've only been doing digital transformation sort of related pieces, right? What I find is that there's no radical difference in technology or solutions out there. What the sort of crisis has done is sort of accelerated the whole thing by 5 years. That's all it's done. It's not really changed much from a target state. It's only changed the speed. And this is my opinion. This is not specifically mine. It is kind of skewed the game a little bit in favor of companies that are agile, right? Large behemoths are struggling. Agile companies are doing really well. So because if you ask me, there is no reason for this conversation not to be having on Skype. Yeah. Skype it's been there now for 2 decades or something like that, right? and everybody across the globe is using Zoom, right? There are other products out there, but it's simply the most agile companies have a skewed advantage now, and most companies use consultants to become agile. So I would say from a consulting point of view, some of the more traditional opportunities have sort of reduced a little bit, I would say, but this definitely, you will see a lot of peak in M&A, a lot of peak in private equity, because the market's going down brings one kind of struggle for Daniel, but then there have been industries that have been trading on very high ratios, which are basically impossible to get into, but now suddenly all the ratios have fallen. So if companies have liquidity now, they're looking at M&A, P&E, they're doing really well. Digital transformation is doing, I wouldn't say it's doing as well as the M&A and the P&E piece, but what it's doing is it's able to now get a lot of new clientele, which previously it was struggling to get, and in areas where, let's say you already knew the client, the trust is help them get over this crisis, right? It's not really new business in many cases, it's just different business, but where it's helping them is getting these clients who were previously reluctant to change at the speed. It's helping them there. Overall, I find that because London is maybe a little skewed towards finance industry a little bit, but otherwise it's a very balanced market in terms of the kind of projects they do, and most companies will not look at it just as London, they look at it as a region which has maybe Amsterdam, maybe Brussels, maybe Luxembourg. So overall, consulting in all of these offices, different work, but definitely no dearth of work. I wouldn't say that there's a dearth of work at all.
Interesting. So just a heads up for the panelists, we've had close to 60 people who are following this live on YouTube, and some really interesting questions that have flown in. Roshni, is this a good time to get some of those in as well?
Yes, I think, and we have kind of spilled over to the Q&A sessions. They're going to be very happy if we don't take those questions.
So some of these are really, really specific. So maybe some of the really specific ones we can send over to you guys, but I'll just take some of the generic ones first.
Yeah.
So some of them are pertaining to internships and opportunities. So do the opportunities differ for the September and the Jan intakes in terms of consulting and finance, or how does that angle work? Anyone? Probably you can start with Anderson.
Yeah, sorry, I was in mute. Yeah, sure. I think there is a big difference. I think in January, I can count in my fingers, I think, how many people did internship. I think like 10 people, like 10% of my batch did internships, because companies are not most of the part willing to accept you for a 6 weeks. And also, I think people, I don't know, people just don't go a lot for internships, while in September is a better, let's say, course format if you want to go for internship, for sure, because you can do it in January. In my case, I don't think a lot of people did also the internship that the year after. Some people that did this, I think most of them got the full-time work, but then it was already in the industry or the company they were willing to work for. It was not to gain experience, so it's a very different angle from the September intake.
I think it's got to do with which kind of internship we're looking for. If it's a very specific, like maybe finance and consulting, where it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, which you can squeeze in, and if you get your applications in time, similar opportunity. But most of Europe looks for a 6-month internship, right? So that's the most typical internship you'll get. So for that, you need to wait to finish your program and then do it, or you might make your as September intake, you might take electives and shave off time from your 3rd term and then put it in there.
Another thing then on the just with the September perspective, if you haven't got a job by the end of it, so the September batch finishes in December. So what's a bit of a pain about that is that in December, there's not a whole pile happening. People are doing Christmas parties, pretty quiet month. And then January is pretty quiet as well. So if you don't have anything by the end of it, what can be a bit frustrating is just the timing of that. And that's what is nice about, even on the January intake, you probably have less opportunities to do the internship, but it is nice that I think you finish as of March or April, depending on your elective. So it's quite a nice time to come into the hiring season. And actually, a lot of people, what happens in a lot of places, I mean, especially for banks, a lot of people will leave after they get their bonus, which is generally paid in March. So you'll find that like there's a big changes around that time as well.
Yep.
So both have positives and negatives.
So there's a very specific question on how do you identify which are the target and non-target schools for a company? Like, is there like some kind of database, or does the college help you out with that? How does that work? So
don't know.
My litmus test was if they can tell you I'm taking applications from this school on this date, you are kind of a target school. That was my litmus test. If they can give you a date for your school, that tells me a lot about it. If they ask you to go to the generic deadline, that tells me that tells you something, right? So that was my litmus test. I don't know. But the other two.
I think that sums it up quite well. There are some questions on visa as well, like how easy or difficult is it to get a work visa sponsorship across Europe? I understand it will be different for each city, but overall, what was your experience like on that one?
I don't know.
No.
I mean, maybe Anderson, do you want to speak about the Middle East or something like that, and then I can take this side.
Yeah, well, before coming to Dubai, I did had a couple interviews for London and for France as well, and I don't think visa was a big concern for these companies. Well, they were big companies, so yeah, I think as Kunal said before, if you have the right profile and that's something that that they really want in the team, I don't think a visa will be a major issue, let's say. And I know a lot of people from my batch that didn't have a visa and then stayed in Europe after the MBA also. So yeah, I think, of course, if you have the visa, it helps, especially in these small startups and smaller companies. But for big companies, I don't think it's a big of a concern.
And what I found was that so finance and consulting usually is not a problem. They're used to having a very international crowd. They have their teams, and that process is very well set. I found that some tech companies and some industry companies were very clear that you can only apply to offices where you already have work permit, right? That was not to say that they didn't want to move you around. It's just that they felt that you start in those offices and then you can move around. So they prefer to give you mobility once you're 12 months into the cycle. It's like, and there's a smaller companies where it's difficult because sometimes they don't have a dedicated HR, legal department, tax department that help them manage it. So it's not just about your work permit, it's about them having their process. And if it's a big enough company, they will have it. Yeah.
There's a question specifically for Daniel. Daniel, so the question is that what roles were you targeting for your finance internships apart from wealth management and private banking? If you could just lay it out there, like what the options were.
What was the question again?
So the question is, what were the other roles that we were looking at while you were picking your finance internship apart from private banking?
Well, actually, that was, I mean, the main thing I was looking for was investment banking and private equity. But as I mentioned, I mean, that is extremely tough to get into, and it just happened that wealth management was the best offer that I got. I mean, I was just looking at anything on the finance side, so restructuring, M&A, corporate finance, and then the wealth management. I mean, you only have UBS and Credit Suisse really are the two big ones. And Credit Suisse recruit directly from HEC. And actually, there's been a very, very strong recruitment from HEC over the years. I mean, in my class, there was, there's 500 applicants. They picked 10 people for the summer internship. 2 are from HEC. Which is a good return. Similarly, on the full-time program, they hired 10. There was just me, but then they hired someone actually into a consulting role as well, outside of the MBA program. Yeah, I mean, on the finance side, I mean, I went for most things.
Interesting. This is actually a very specific question that how many people from your batch got into a private equity or a venture capital internship? And it's a very specific thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the venture capital is a bit different because, I mean, maybe there's more institutional things now, but a lot of venture capital things are quite small. So, you know, if you're doing a VC internship, pretty good chance you're not going to get paid. Will it convert into a full thing? I don't know. That's a very, very hard one to get into. And I mean, it's personally one I'm not interested in that much. How many people actually got into it? I mean, from our class, I got into Credit Suisse. Another guy, I think, got into the Deutsche Bank asset management part. Another guy from my class got into a private equity team that does, what is it? They do like private equity for minerals. So it's like buying mines. Actually, he's not too far from Zurich. Who else? I think that was about it. I mean, no one made it into investment banking. No one really made it into private equity. Did one person make it into venture capital, I think, but I think he started doing his own thing. That was it. Yeah, it's extremely tough to break in because, like, post 2008, like hiring, you know, if you're doing investment banking, the hours are crazy. The pay is very good, but they don't really have a whole pile of incentive a lot of times to take on MBA candidates. So, you know, there's probably 8 to 10 positions up for grabs. I mean, you've got crazy competition for that, generally coming from people that have backgrounds in the area. It's really, really tough. Similar with private equity. I mean, you can have a better chance by trying to get into a smaller boutique place. Maybe you'll have to take a bit of a hit on salary. It might be more difficult then with visa issues. So yeah, it's definitely one of the tough ones. And you know, if anyone is looking to go towards finance, they should definitely reach out to myself or reach out to anyone else from the class that has done it, that can give them some tips.
Someone actually asked that would an exchange program with LBS or Wharton change that equation, and how easy or difficult is it to get that?
I don't think so, because it's not just confined to the school. I mean, I have friends that went to LBS, like really clever guys. They couldn't break into investment banking either. It's just, you know, they'll probably take 10 people out of 1,000 applicants, maybe more. So it's just unless you have some very, very niche background that fits in very well with it. Doing the exchange doesn't make much difference. I mean, generally when you're doing the exchanges for the last semester, and by that stage, you know, they're not hiring people just based on the school. I mean, it's not a case of that. It's just a tough one to get into.
Thanks for that, Daniel. So I think there are a couple of other questions also very specific. So maybe the specific ones we could just send it out to your mail, and maybe
of course, yeah, no problem.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you to all the 3 panelists. You have been extremely patient. I know we are close to time, but we have one small fun part to the whole thing. So we have a rapid fire. Okay, so I'm going to ask a few questions, and you could tell us what you first think. So I'll begin with you, Daniel. How likely it is for us to see you running for election in your parliamentary constituency?
It depends what the pay is like. Generally, there's not enough money in politics. That's the problem.
Okay.
Interesting. So Anderson, I have one for you actually. So what is the one consulting stereotype which is actually true?
They all have booze earphones. No, everybody's got a big headphone. Yeah, in the airplane. Yeah, that's true.
And Kunal, we'll end with you. What is your last piece of advice for incoming students?
Incoming students, right? Oh, okay. So basically, to make sure that you take time to know your batch well, right? I think take the time. Don't come with preconceived notions. Don't build preconceived notions in the first few weeks. I think you will see that everyone there is a spectacular individual. You just need to spend some time and get to know that side of them. I would say that's one part. And don't worry about the job beyond what is necessary, right? You will get a job, right? It's only the difference is a job or the job that you wanted. So there's a level of anxiety you should have, but after a point, don't get too worried about it, because you will see people who will end up getting jobs after the second term, third term. They have something because they've done internship, they have something. And then people who get it maybe a couple of months after they have kind of finished their coursework as well, right? In the long run, I haven't seen that make any difference to anybody. It's the anxiety level. You need to be excited, but not anxious. I think that's the thing.
Okay. Daniel Anderson, any closing comments for us?
Yeah, as I would say, I think it's very close to what Kunal said, that a lot of people freak out right at the beginning of the course, trying to go for, oh, I need to apply to this job already or apply here and there. I think the way it works is that you need to have a reflection moment and decide that it's a great moment when you are in the MBA to reflect a bit what you want is in your career. At least take the 3 or 4 first months to do all of that, prepare a good CV, do good preparation, prepare a good cover letter, and then once you start really applying, apply to the correct targets, let's say. And enjoy the experience. I think in the first 6 months, especially, is where you get a lot of networking. So don't kill yourself on studying a lot. Really, just do a lot of networking. Enjoy campus, enjoy HEC, the whole experience, and don't freak out from day one, let's say.
Exactly, and I mean, I mentioned the main one for me is, I mean, the two guys covered a lot of it there, but you know, it's literally the one time in your life after you've left college where you'll have a year and a half where you can kind of work, but have some fun and try things that you say you wouldn't have before. You know, it's a great adventure, and everyone I've talked to. Actually, I'll give you a good story. Before, whenever I got the offer to do the course, I was a bit skeptical. Because I was thinking, you know, am I wasting 60 or 70,000 when I could just be doing something else instead? And I called up a guy who had done the executive MBA that I'd met at some event before. And I said to him, I was like, look, I've got accepted. I said, what do you think? I mean, is it a thing that's worth doing? And the phone was silent because I could hear him, like, you could hear him reminiscing in his head. And like, I thought he was going to start crying. He was like, yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done. So you'll have a great time, and you'll have you'll have bad days, and you'll have days when you're frustrated, and you'll have days when you're fed up doing stupid coursework at whatever time. You'll be fed up with traveling to the campus, which is a pain in the ass. But like, you'll make really good friends out of it. You'll have great experiences. You'll have tried things that you never would have got the opportunity to do otherwise. And then probably on the best side, because I actually have it behind me, you'll get the benefit of living in Paris as well, because I have a photo of it there. But no, you'll all have a great time, and just reach out to any of the people who've already graduated. They'll always be happy to give you some guidance along the way.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. You'll not only shared with us the advice, but your wonderful stories. I think that's what made this session so colorful, at least for me. And on behalf of the over 70 people who are watching this live on YouTube, thank you so much for your time and participation in this event. And we look forward to connecting with you in future. Thank you.
Best of luck to everyone that's going to start.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
best of luck.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
The session, guys.
Wait.
Are we still live?
Yeah, I'm
there. Oh, we're still live.
I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Roshni, I made you host. You'll have to end it.
Okay, wait. It's okay. How do I